Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third event in our grad school prep series. So this event tonight is going to focus on briefly about writing samples, but then we're going to spend the bulk of the time on personal statements and CVs. So I just really want to go over quickly why this series in the first place. For those of you who didn't attend the first two events, the first one was called Preparing for Grad School, and the second one was called Applying for Grad School. The whole impetus of this was that we realized that a lot of students felt ill-prepared in terms of what they needed to know for a grad school. And so we put together this series and the group of directors that always participate to really give students information and to arm them with all the necessary knowledge that they need to be competitive in that very competitive market that is grad school admissions. This particular event is going to focus on the written pieces. So aside from the application and the preparation, what are those additional supplemental materials like a personal statement, like a CV that are often requested of people that are applying to grad school? So what I'd like to do first is just a little housekeeping. If you could just remember that if you have any questions at all, you can feel free to post them in the chat, or you can hold them to the end and you can ask them in the breakout rooms, which we'll do at the very end with discipline-specific rooms. And also just to keep in mind that when we do the breakout rooms, we'll be organizing that according to topic and field. So we'll be putting up the numbers for the for each of the rooms. And if you can just adjust your name with the number ahead of it, that will actually help us. So if you go to the, let's see, there's a naming option. Near your name, you'll see 3 dots. And those dots, if you click on them, will allow you to rename yourself. And then if you just put the number in advance of it, so 1 dash Carla Marquez Lewis would be mine. I would get put in the nursing room, et cetera. So that'll just help us. And you have the whole event to do this. So we're not going to be doing the breakouts for a while. And if you have any trouble, it's there in the chat how to do that. If you still need assistance, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll guide you through that. So with that, I just want to welcome you again. Thank you for sharing your evening with us. And I hope that this is very informative. I want to introduce our panel members, and they're going to wave for now, and so that you know who they are, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So our first panelist is Dr. Memory Danga, Associate Academic Director for the Health Services Administration and Health Information Management Programs. Second, we have Shanira Rojas, Academic Program Coordinator for the Youth Studies Program. Dr. Patricia Bartley Daniele, Associate Professor and Graduate Nursing Education Program Coordinator for the Nursing Program. Dr. Isabel Alicia, Associate Academic Director for the Psychology Programs. And Kelsey Richardson, Career Advisor for the Career Services Office. I think that's everyone. So I am Carla Marquez Lewis. I'm the Director for the Psychology Programs and also the moderator for this evening. So why don't we go ahead and get started with writing samples. So what is a writing sample and why is it requested and required as part of some graduate school applications? And then what should or shouldn't be used as a writing sample? So for this, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Memory Danga. And also the second question will be taken by Dr. Isabel Alicia.
So thank you, Carla. So as mentioned, we have gone through 2 other series, and now we are having this conversation about writing sample, which is really another key part of your grad school application. So what is really a writing sample? It is a document requested by the admissions committee to assess an applicant's aptitude, preparedness, and ability to actually engage in graduate level writing and cognate argument. So it shows the admissions committee that the quality of your academic work, and it demonstrates the interest and proficiency of your chosen field. So just to summarize, it actually shows your writing skills in terms of grammar, how you express yourself, how you're able to actually relate to what's going on in your field. So not all graduate schools will request it, but when they do, just make sure you actually just follow that specific format they need, and you will understand what you should be writing about. So just make sure you're adding like something that you have written yourself, so it actually shows your own work, something that you have done in the past but more recent, or something that you have updated. So it's really something that you would need to show to make sure that they understand your writing skills and they can actually engage with you at that level. And back to you, Carla.
Dr. Alicia?
Thank you. So different programs require different types of writing. In psychology, for example, it might be useful for you to submit a research paper that you wrote for a class. If you are going to a journalism program, you might want to submit a press release that you wrote for a class or for a job. If you haven't been in school for a very long time and you didn't hold on to your college papers, you could submit writing that you did for a job. So for example, if you had to do some sort of project at work and you had to write a report, that can be submitted as a writing sample for those of you who've been out of school for a long time. One suggestion, try to have it be a document that's at least 750 words long. That's about 2 pages. 2 pages plus. And also, if you're going into a social science, try to have it be a paper that includes formatting. So if you are applying to a psychology program, for example, you want to show that you have some understanding of APA style formatting.
Wonderful. Thank you both. So what we really want to focus on today, we wanted to cover a little bit about writing samples, just because that seems to be an area that's a little confusing for some people. You know, what do I submit exactly? But the focus of tonight is really going to be on personal statements and CVs. So shifting into personal statements, we really want to talk about, you know, what is the intent and the style and the format and the audience for these personal statements? You know, what role do the goals and fit play? And we talked about fit the last 2 sessions. What role do these play in the personal statements? So next, if we go to the next slide, please, about personal statements, Dr. Patricia Bartley-Daniele is going to cover this area and tell us a little bit more about the purpose and format. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to start off in terms of helpful hint. Make sure you read the directions, because the school applications can be different. So, you know, formatting and titles of sections of application can be slightly different. So that's number one. Number two, the intent really is the purpose or the aim of why you want to apply to that graduate program. And certainly going back to some of the other sessions we had, but just to reiterate that when you're looking at graduate school, you're looking at further specialization. So you want to make sure that the program truly reflects that in terms of a fit. And format, again, I'll have to also chime in about, and again, I'm speaking for nursing, but APA format, often it is what we call a capstone paper that may be submitted. But I think the most important thing about the format is that it is scholarly writing, that what we learned in terms of our basic education with sentence structure and paragraphs where you introduce an idea, you embellish upon that, and then kind of make a conclusion so that it is logical in its progression. And the audience, certainly one way you could look at it, and again, each school is different, but there is an admissions committee. You certainly should look at who the faculty are in that department and what their research interests are, what their areas of specialization. And then the last piece of advice for format is, and again, important, that if there is a word limitation or a page limitation, make sure you keep to that, because that also reflects in terms of your writing being coherent, cohesive, and concise. As for how does the roles and fit play into your personal statement? Well, again, I mentioned it would be good to go on the websites and look at the departments and the areas of expertise of the faculty. And I think we all have strengths and weaknesses. So certainly in a lot of disciplines at the master's level, there is a research component. And is that what you truly are interested in? Not just for your academic education and development, but also for your career. And those are things where you feel, are you going to be able to, that they complement each other, so that you also meet not just your academic goals, but your career goals, because eventually, or even maybe at the same time, that's what part of why you're going to school.
Wonderful, thank you. And a lot of students have questions or applicants about their personal history, that specific piece, like how much of their personal history should they introduce and what other content. So Dr. Alicia, can you talk a little bit about how students should be using their personal stories in their personal statement, and if there are things that they should avoid in that area?
Okay, so the most important thing to keep in mind is that when we talk about personal history, we're very interested in your personal academic history. So we want to know what types of courses you've taken, what you found interesting, what you find compelling, what your motivation is. But we want that to be within the context of the program you're applying to. So if you're someone who's absolutely been fascinated by a particular course you took, but that course has nothing to do with what you're applying for, maybe you might not want to mention that so much. You could mention it a little bit in passing, but you don't want to go into too much detail. But explain why it is that you're applying for a particular program, what it is you find interesting about it, and you might be able to connect that a little bit to the courses that are offered in that program in particular. And that's one way to connect personal history to possibility of fit within a particular program. Something to keep in mind is that you don't owe anyone a sob story. Most of us are not looking for a sob story. We are not looking for you to bear your personal history or your personal demons. If they are relevant to explaining something that went wrong during your academic journey, then by all means, you should provide some details. So you should provide an explanation if, for example, financial aid was a major issue, being able to finance school was problematic, or you went through some personal drama that led to your having to drop all classes or led to your not being able to attend class consistently. That you definitely should explain. But you are entitled to privacy. And there are certain details that you may want to keep to yourself, and you absolutely should. And again, this is a document that is meant to support your application for an academic program. So the emphasis should be on the academic, and the personal should be used in support of your academic goals.
Great, thank you. I mean, I'd also say too that, what Dr. Alicia talks about in terms of privacy is you should really take that to heart. You really don't owe anybody all of your secrets. Sometimes students want to divulge diagnoses about mental health issues. Again, if it is appropriate to do so, that's fine. But you aren't required to do that, and you don't have to divulge that kind of personal information. You deserve your privacy, and people don't need to know what you don't want them to know. In terms of where to start, that's usually always the place that students and applicants have trouble with. How do you organize all of this? There's so much that people have to say and so much they want to share. So where does one begin? So Shanira, can you talk to us a little bit about where a student starts? How do they begin writing their personal statement, and really what steps they should do beforehand before they start putting maybe pen to paper or, fingers to keys?
Thank you, Carla. So basically you want to do some brainstorming before you start writing. Some of the questions that I've used when I applied to grad school is thinking about what key points you want to communicate about yourself. What exactly are your career goals and how does graduate school play into that? What have you already learned in the fields? If you have experience in the fields, like what do you enjoy about it? What made you choose this path? Also a great place, that was mentioned earlier was about like if there are any discrepancies, like career, school gap, a low GPA at one point. That's some place to explain, why that happened, and also what supports that you have now that will allow you to be successful in graduate school. And also just thinking about your personal story, right? Thinking about how do I stand out from the crowd, right? How has my life shaped my choice to apply for graduate school? What do you want the admissions committee to know about you, right? And things of that nature. I noticed if you start answering those kind of questions, you're basically starting your personal statement. And then I know that we're going to talk a little bit about like style and like do's or don'ts and whatnot, because people start their personal statements in so many different ways. I've seen so many different things as far as like the beginning of something, right? You want it to pop, you want it to stand out. Some people use quotes, some people use like a really intensive like first line. So it really kind of depends on who you are and what you want to share, what kind of tone you want to bring into your personal statement. But the most important thing is doing that brainstorm and making sure that your short-term and your long-term goals are being shared, your strengths, and basically how will you benefit from the degree, and also what you can bring to the field. How will the field benefit from it as well? Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So in terms of sort of things that have been effective or things that have been problematic, final sort of do's and don'ts of writing effective personal statements, I wanted to open it up to all of our panel members. Let's start with the first one. As people who have served on admissions committees for many years, what have you seen that has been particularly effective, or what have you seen that has been particularly problematic in personal statements? I'll open it up to whoever wants to talk. Feel free to use the hand raise feature if there's multiple people. Janira Rojas.
So something that I've seen that's been really effective is something that like someone will tell a story that includes examples when they've had an experience in the field that helped shape them into becoming, for example, a youth worker and for youth studies, an example where they worked with a young person that was really meaningful for them, as opposed to someone else who could share too much about like a personal issue that was like mentioned earlier. That's something that you shouldn't do. You also want to be yourself, and be authentic, but also be mindful, like you want to not be like sarcastic, or you don't want to be humorous because you don't know how the reader will take that. So that's also something to really think about as well.
Those are great tips for students and applicants. Dr. Denga.
What I've seen is when students are writing like their essay, when it's organized and everything is clear, that's much easier to handle and to actually admit the student. So that's more like on a positive note. It's effective. Someone can actually follow through your train of thought and understand what you're writing about and how you what your conclusion is all about. But one of the problematic things that I've seen also is when there is no clear direction. Pretty much the opposite, when there's no clear direction of what you're writing about, or maybe there's really no mention of the program. Like recently, I just saw an application that didn't even mention HIM. I mean, the Health Information Management Program. They did not even mention anything about HIM. So it's hard for me to actually accept that student because I'm not sure if they apply to the right program. So I start to have all these other questions which should be addressed when they actually submit that writing sample.
Thank you. Dr. Bartley-Daniele?
I think what's been very effective with a personal statement is often professional or job experience will be described as a foundation and an interest for grad school, but it's not just what the job description is, and the amount of years, but really what did you do and what did you contribute during that time? Are there statements in your personal statement that reflect growth already? And contribution, not just say to your immediate surroundings, but to your organization. I would definitely say that is and again, I'll talk from nursing. We focus so much on specialization and clinical practice, but in addition to that, what have you done in that clinical practice? In terms of contributing to either some quality initiatives or participating in even unit activities that say promote harmony or cohesiveness. So I would say that is really one of the things that we look at in terms of the personal statements.
Thank you. Professor Alicia.
Thank you. So I'll start off with problematic, and then I'm going to go to effective because I've seen some really, really great essays. But problematic, I recently heard about, and I say that focused almost entirely on a person's diagnosis, being diagnosed with a psychological disorder, and the entire essay was about the disorder. In terms of explaining what the disorder was, how the disorder impacted the person's life. And there was nothing in the essay about the person's academic goals. And the person then did not get into the program and filed a complaint for discrimination when it was very clear that, you know, the person was working through issues, and a psychology program, a psychology graduate program, is not necessarily where you work through your personal issues. It's where you are going to be trained, you know, in a particular direction in academic psychology. And so be careful with that. Again, be careful with disclosure, be careful with focusing excessively on a disorder, because that can raise red flags for those who are on the admissions committee. Very quickly, something that was really, really, really effective. I saw an essay not long ago where the person started with a quote from Audre Lorde from The Transformation of Silence into Action. And it's this beautiful quote about how things that matter to you have to be said and have to be shared. And the person just wove that throughout the essay. And it was just such a beautiful job in terms of explaining why it was important to advocate for children, and why it was important also to you know, get a degree that allowed them to be a better advocate for children.
Yeah, quotes tend to draw people in. Also, I'm really taken by personal statements that start with something that I'm not expecting. I've seen people write about dreams they've had as kind of an opener. And it does make me kind of lean forward in my chair. Where is this going? And catches your attention. And then it of course has to tie in. You have to make the tie-ins to how this is, what this is drawing me into and how it relates to this program. But those things I think are very eye-catching. I mean, remember, the people that are reading these personal statements are human, and they do want to read something that is interesting and not just something that is completely flat and fact only. So I would say kind of spice it up a little if you can. These, you know, people read lots and lots of these personal statements, and you don't want yours to be simply just forgettable. You know, and I would avoid cliches. I think someone else mentioned it too, but you know, I'll speak just for psychology. This probably, I would say, works the same way for nursing and and even HIM, some of the other service sort of professions. But you know, things like "I'd like to help people," you know, those kinds of catchphrases. I mean, I don't think there's anyone that has ever applied to the psychology program that isn't interested, or nursing or something like that isn't interested in helping people. So try to keep yourself a little bit unique and be mindful of those kinds of pitfalls. Anything else anyone wants to add? Any final do's and don'ts of writing an effective personal statement? Ms. Ross.
So one of the best things you can do is just read your personal statement out loud. Because you can find so many, mistakes, grammar. Also let friends read it, family, anyone you can that you trust that can help provide some feedback or proofread it. It is so important. I've seen so many grammar mistakes and I'm just like, come on, this is graduate school, right? You want to make sure that we know that you take this seriously, to have looked over your work and to present your best work, whether it be a writing sample or your personal statement.
Professor Denga, did you want to add something?
I was actually, I was going to echo on letting someone read your statement, because even the best writers make mistakes. So you want to make sure that whatever you're presenting to somebody, at least someone else looked at it, and that second eye really helps. That's what I was going to say. So that's it from me.
Great. I think I'll just throw in one more thing. Don't be apologetic. I read a lot of personal statements where students apologize for a lot of things. You're pretty wonderful. You should allow that to kind of shine through, and you have things to offer. I often, remind students and applicants that, we're looking at your application, but you're also sort of looking at us. So remember that, you have something, to offer too, and you should try to let those things shine through. I want to shift gears for a second, if that's okay with people. And I want to go to CVs, because I think even the words that are attached to the letter CV are often confusing to people. And this is something that's very common in academia. So when you're applying to grad programs, they will often ask for a CV. Some will often ask for a resume too. So it's nice to know the difference. So I'm going to turn this over to Kelsey Richardson, who's with us from the Career Services Office, to talk us through CVs, what they are, how they differ from resumes, what to do, what not to do. And I'll turn it over to you now, Kelsey. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Yep, there we are. Thank you. Okay, so definition, purpose, and format for CVs. So CVs, curriculum vitae, are sometimes intimidating sounding, right? It sounds like, what, a CV? What do you want? But a CV is just another form of a resume, really. And really the CV focus is really on your academic career goals and your academic accomplishments. And so you would use a CV for any job that you would apply to that is related to academia, in the sense of, like, if it's a teaching position or research oriented position or something like that. And then for any grad school programs that are in fields that you would get a job in those areas. So the CV is a really important document, and it's different from a resume in that with CVs, and I'll show you in just a moment a sample of a CV so you can look more tangibly at what I'm talking about. But resumes have limitations in terms of length. Employers and admissions committees do not want to see long resumes. Usually resumes are expected to be 1 page or 2 pages. 2 pages are just as good as 1, which is nice, because years ago it used to be that resumes were supposed to be only 1 page, so 1 or 2 pages. But CVs actually can be very lengthy, just depending on how much experience you have that's relevant to where you're applying. So some CVs are 3 pages long, some are 5 pages long, some are 10 or 20 pages long. So it really does vary, because there are just a lot more components to a CV than there are for a resume. So that's why, the length is something that is determined really by your background and experience. And in terms of the intent and audience and appropriate situations for CVs, again, it's academically focused. So it's really for applying for grad school programs that have to do with either research areas or teaching, or just something that is really academically focused, because it does detail out your teaching experience, your research experience, committee work, like all those kinds of categories. Next slide. So the main sections and format of a CV, I want to show you that. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I am going to go to first, actually, the resume sample. Okay, so just quickly, this resume here, you see it starts with a summary of qualifications, which is really good to have on top of resume. It used to be that objectives were on top of resumes mostly, but summary of qualifications can be more powerful because it focuses more on what you have to offer as opposed to what you're looking for, because you have, you know, your personal statement to go into more of what you're looking for. And your resume or your CV, you want to be focused more on the different kinds of skills and qualifications you have. And then there's the professional experience section there. And then education, usually, then honors, and then skills. So this is a one-page version of a resume, but you see, you know, it's pretty concise. And again, it can be 2 pages, but this is your usual resume format. And then the CV, on the other hand, now the CV, this particular sample has a career objective on the top. So it doesn't have the summary, but your CV can have a summary on it, which again, I think does tend to be more effective even. Then we have the education section. You see you're coming right into it at the beginning of the CV because you want to be emphasizing your education. So we've got the education section. Then if you have any teaching credentials, that can be listed next. Then if you have specific teaching experience, there's a teaching experience section next that for this particular sample, it goes on to the second page. So if you do carry one category over to the next page, it's usually helpful to have a heading that says that section continued. And then also you see up here a header that has your name and page 2 of 4 or 2 of 5, however many pages you have. That's helpful because if the admissions committee or if you're submitting your CV for a job, if they print out your resume or your CV, it's good for them to be able to, if they mix up the pages, to be able to see like exactly what page goes where. Then this next section here, there's committee work. Then we've got presentations. You can list your presentations that you've done. And professional development seminars and training is another section that you'll want to include. And then on to the next page, grant writing. If there's any impressive, relevant grant writing that you've done, you'd want to include that. Any research experience that you have, also, that's really helpful to include. And then also professional membership, to make sure you're listing those, including your honors and awards as well. And then this last page here has publications. So any publications that you've had, anything you've published, this is broken up into journal articles, book chapters and contributions, and book reviews. So you also want to make sure that you're including your publications as well. So as you can see, the CV definitely has, a lot more to it than the resume because, when you are applying for a program where you would get a position that's in an academic field, you definitely want to be able to show the admissions committee all the different areas that you have to help qualify you, for this type of field. So let me just go back to the teaching experience section. If you do not have teaching experience, then this can say employment experience, and you can list out your employment experience. If you have, let's say, 1 or 2 parts that you could put in your teaching experience, 1 or 2 positions that you've held, you could say teaching experience, list 2 of them, and then you can do another section that says additional experience. or additional employment experience, and then you can list out the rest. So there are different ways that you can work with these categories, and it really just depends on what your specific experience and qualifications are. So that's just kind of a closer look, at all of these sections, just so you can more tangibly see, what we're talking about. So I'm gonna stop sharing so we can go back to the PowerPoint. Great, thank you. And next slide. Okay, so what steps should you take to prepare? So when you're going to put your CV together, usually you have a resume already, because most of us have had to have resumes for a long time. So you want to gather together your resume so that you have all the information that you have on there. And then just start listing out, like, what do you want to include on your CV? Which sections? Do you have the publications that you want to include? Do you have committee work? Do you have professional associations? And you want to just start kind of compiling your information and putting it together. And the other thing that I would suggest is there are a lot of templates out there that you can find to create CVs, but I usually do not suggest that you use a template, because templates, even though they can look really fancy and snazzy, they're kind of limiting in terms of how you can update your information and change it going forward when you need to revise it, and the way you want to arrange your information. So Microsoft Word, sometimes people think Microsoft Word is too plain, but you can definitely do lots with formatting within Microsoft Word, and it gives you the ultimate flexibility in terms of being able to move around your information and update it and change it. So definitely start compiling all your information into a Microsoft Word document, start putting your categories together, and figuring out, like which aspects of the CV that you need to highlight in which order, just in terms of, again, you definitely want to start at the top with either your summary or your career objectives and your education, but then go into, is it teaching experience that you have, or is it, kind of regular work experience? And then from there, then decide, do you have a lot of publications, and should that go next? Or should it be your committee work, or should it be your grant writing, whatever it is, depending on what program you're applying for and what your strongest qualifications are. That's kind of how you want to make the order of your CV so that it's the most effective. Next slide. Okay, and then so I know that we want to get more input here on what's particularly effective with CVs and problematic. So I'll just start off just by saying that one of the things that's very effective with CVs is making sure, pretty similar to some of the tips that you got on personal statements, is making sure, of course, that you proof it incredibly carefully and read it out loud. And sometimes it's even helpful to start at the end of the document and read it out loud to the beginning, because sometimes we go on automatic pilot when we're reading from the start to finish. And if you start at the back of the document and move forward, sometimes it can take you out of automatic pilot and you can catch mistakes that you might not have caught otherwise. But definitely have another set of eyes look at your CV, and the Career Services Office is here for you for that as well. So definitely make appointments at the Career Services Office so that you can have your CV looked at. But it's really important to make sure that your formatting's clear and it's proofed well, and that it's done, it's worded as powerfully as you can with the most powerful action verbs and descriptions that you can use, so that you position your qualifications in the strongest way. So that's usually what's most effective. And in terms of problematic, it's kind of the opposite of that. You don't want it to look scattered. You don't want mistakes on it. You don't want the formatting to be inconsistent. So you just want to really be careful of all of that. But I'm sure that others have thoughts too on what's effective and problematic with CVs. Does anybody else want to add their thoughts in?
Kelsey, can I ask a quick question and then I'll jump over to Professor Alicia.
Sure.
If a student or applicant doesn't have, let's say, committee work, is there
Mhm.
something else they can put there in its place? And likewise, if they don't have any publications, what else could they put in there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, if there isn't committee work, it's not really like there's a substitute for that. So you would just not have that category because it's not like committee work is an expected category. It's just one of the options that you have if it's something that you have experience with. So there's no worry if you don't have experience with committee work, you just wouldn't put it on there. You would just be really focusing on the other categories that you do have and putting it on there. And what was your other question, Carla?
It was if students or applicants don't have any formal publications, is there anything else they can put there?
Sure. Yeah. Well, if there's anything that's kind of related to publications, like you could list your details about your thesis that you've written, you know, if you've done a thesis or something for your capstone, a special project, you can list projects and things of that sort. Or if there's student publications that you've been a part of, you could also list anything related to that.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Alicia?
Thank you. So I know some of you who are, listening to this information session are very young and you haven't had a lot of work experience, and you may be in the position where you're saying to yourself, well, what is all of this? And, what can I fit in what category? I recently went through this with my niece who was applying to master's programs. And we did the research together and we found a lot of different ways to be flexible in, moving information around. So for example, if you are part of a student club, and let's say you're part of a psychology club or a nursing club, and you are part of the executive committee or you're the secretary, that's something that you can include on your CV as some version of, it's not, formal committee work, such as if you were on governing council, but it is a committee that you're working with, and it shows that you're able of getting along with people and doing something formal where you have to follow rules. And you can also, put language skills on your CV, for example. So if you are fluent in more than one language, you could indicate that. Don't say you're fluent in something you're not fluent in. That's very important. Go with what you actually have skills in, because people will test you and ask you questions, or they may have the expectation that you can do something that then you might not be able to back up. If you've done volunteer work, because some of you don't have a lot of formal work experience, but if you've done volunteer work, you can put that on a CV, and it does count as experience. It's really about thinking of what you've done. And I know for some of you, you're thinking, I'm only 22, I'm only 23, I haven't done anything. You've done something. Talk to someone about it. Again, gather your material before you start working. And there's someone in your life who can help you put this in perspective, whether it's career services or a relative or a friend.
Great, thank you so much. Does anyone else want to add anything else about things they've seen that have been particularly effective or things that have been problematic? Any of our other panelists? Okay. Well, I want to turn it over to the breakout sessions so that those who have joined us today can get some very specific questions answered. And it's nice to do that in smaller groups because people feel more comfortable asking questions there, especially if they're discipline specific questions. So if you have not already changed your name to include your number, let's do that now. I see many of you have, but some haven't. The way to do that is at the top right side of your picture or your face, and click on those three dots. You will then see something that says way at the bottom, rename, and I'm going to do it myself so you can see. Used to say Carla Marquez Lewis. Now I'm going to say I'm going to pretend I'm going to the nursing program. And suddenly my name now has the 1, and we know to put you in the nursing breakout room. So if you're nursing, that's a 1. 2 is psychology. 3 is youth studies. 4 would be health information management and health services administration. Again, as is noted in the chat, if your program is not here today, we did have an emergency situation for 2 of our panelists who were not able to make it. So if you are in the business or disabilities breakout rooms, or at least plan to go there, feel free to change the number to one of these 4, and you can go into those breakout rooms and talk to those panelists. Or you can also just directly email them, and those are in the chat. I want to turn it back for a second to Kelsey Richardson, who's going to talk to you a little bit and close us out with the resources that are available to you at the SPS Career Services office. They're wonderful there and a great resource. So Kelsey.
Thank you, Carla. So yes, definitely come see us at Career Services. We are here for you. We have Career Link, which is our online system, and that allows you to make appointments with us for whatever you need help with. So if you'd like to schedule advising sessions with us, you can do that. We usually meet with students about resume reviews, cover letter reviews. If you are starting out on LinkedIn, but you haven't had much experience with it and you need more assistance with that, we've got LinkedIn and social media training. You also can use Career Link to look for jobs within our site. So we have job postings in there, and we also have some internship postings in there. So definitely take a look. We also, every semester, we have webinars that we offer, often on resume writing or on interviewing skills. And we just had one on career changers. So definitely keep a lookout. We usually send emails directly to you, but definitely take a look out for our webinars. We'll be letting you know about those. And usually each spring we have a virtual career fair. So definitely, look out for that. Also, we usually start putting out information about that at the beginning of the year. So definitely, please find us. We look forward to working with all of you whenever you're ready, on your timing, of course, because we know that you're very busy students with balancing your schoolwork and family and your jobs and everything else. And so, when you need our assistance, again, please call on us.
Great. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
thank you again to all of our panelists for joining us this evening. And we're going to move you now into breakout rooms where you can ask your questions and learn more about and workshop personal statements and talk about CVs as well if you have some more questions. And we will not join back here again in the main room. After the breakout rooms, you're free to go. And again, thank you. We hope that this information, this series has been helpful to you. And thanks for joining us tonight. Have a good night.